Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is podcast number 12, featuring Chief Erskine, Miss Norcross, Stonington History Legends. So, first question. Now, something I'm really curious about, and I never got to take Stonington history with Miss Fool as a class, but the Battle of Stonington, how did that start? Why did that become? Can you just take us through the history of the Battle of Stonington?
I don't really did much research on that, I'll be honest with you. Battle of Stonington.
So it's part of the War of 1812, and it actually happened in August of 1814, if I'm not mistaken. So it's the War of 1812, but it went on for a number of years, and it was another war against the British. And I should know more about it because I did teach Stonington history for a couple of years. But Stonington Harbor was attacked by the British Navy, and the men of Stonington stepped up, and they were able to successfully defend the village against the fleet. And there were minimal casualties. There was actually a British soldier buried in a cemetery in Stonington that was a casualty of that battle. But fun fact, Stonington is the only town in the United States to successfully defend itself against the British in 2 wars.
Wow.
American Revolution and War of 1812.
Wow. So, why did they attack Stonington? Was it just
that I can't tell you the specifics of it. I mean, I imagine again as a port town, there would have been ships here. It would have been a place that there was a lot of travel in and out of. So, but I if you had prepared me, I would have known more.
So, kind of just, the fact of the British soldier being buried here is, I would have never known that. But is there any other interesting facts about Stonington that you just wouldn't really know?
Well, as far as I know, the Stanton Davis homestead, it currently, as far as I know, is the oldest operating farm in the United States. I don't know if that's still true. It was true for a while. There were some older ones that had, stopped operations. That's kind of a fun fact. That's down the street from where I grew up, next door to Mr. Erskine. And there's a stone there that apparently Venture Smith, who was a slave that lived on that property, who later earned his freedom, lifted. It was like a massive boulder, and it's carved on the stone his name and, the occasion of him being the only one on the farm that could lift this 400-pound stone or something. That's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. His house was on Barn Island, and you can find the foundation. I know Mrs. Houle takes her class to go find it.
Yeah, I think they take them on an escort down there every once in a while, don't they?
Yeah. So a lot of great things happened in our town, for sure. Yeah.
A lot of that land now is owned by the state of Connecticut.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of history. So, taking it back, around the time of the war, 1800s to 1850s, obviously a lot of shipping and whaling, but what did life look like in Stonington around that time? Was it, just personal shops and stores, or
farms? A lot of farms.
A lot of farms. There was a lot of farms right up until the 1950s. When I was growing up, I came through the school system in the 50s and graduated from Stonington in '62. But about 2 or 3 years ago, the Historical Society, going to do a program on farms. And a lot of the roads are named after a lot of the farms, because there was a lot of farms, and it was delivering milk. Those farms were delivering milk, like the Crowleys. They had a farm, they delivered milk. Stone Acres, it went right along. Now there's big housing developments and so forth in there, and you go up Wheeler Road, all the golf courses in the town of Stonington were farms.
Right.
They were all farms.
Yeah, we talked about, in AP Gov, we talked about how when they put in 95, they
Right, 95 came through and cut a lot of those roads, right? 1964, they opened that 95 up.
Right.
And it's interesting, you know, and that's how when Route 27 really started popping. There were farms over there on Route 27. And then later on, everybody built off of that. And how the whole town changed is I always told them, you know, in the history class, you could go from the Masons Island Light to the drawbridge in Mystic, and there were like 15 gas stations because Route 1 was the main road.
Right.
And then after 95 came through, then boom, everybody starts moving, and how it changed everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 78 and Pawcatuck changed everything too, you know,
Right,
instead of Route
right,
2.
Right. One of the other big industries in the early 19th century was sealing. Like ships would go looking for seals because they were a hot commodity. And Captain Nathaniel Palmer, who the Palmer House, you know, it's his family's home, he found Antarctica. So another fun fact about Stonington, the person who found Antarctica is from Stonington. And they would go down there on, you know, there were ships from Stonington going all over the world. But farming was what most people were doing. Fishing came in a little later.
So did we have really big ships like to make that voyage?
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Mystic Seaport, if you go
Right.
over there, you know, the Morgan obviously was a whaling ship, but we're talking about that kind of scale. Were the kinds of ships that were coming out of here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, holding that many people, you kind of have to have a big ship.
Yeah. To go that far.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that I was always curious about was Dean's Mill School and kind of the development of that property, because obviously it used to be a mill and then it became a school. So how did that property?
Well, then the school name came from the street name, actually. You know, came from the fact that that was Dean's Mill Road.
Oh,
so
okay.
the mill, I think, was. I do have an article about that in my room somewhere. But the mill had fallen out of use long before that.
Right.
I mean, that school opened, if I'm not mistaken, in the late 60s. I was there.
In the late 60s.
I was a student there in
67,
the-
68, somewhere around there.
I started going to school there in
then-
1973.
Right, they built
so-
that at the same time. It was what we called the baby boom. And the baby boom started and built West Vine Street School also, you know. That's when and then the fall of 62, they opened up Mystic Junior High, then it was Mystic Middle School, you know, changed the name a number of times. But that's what, you know, opened that up. And then they had the fire at the borough school.
Right.
And then they put the addition on the Dean's Mill School, and they used the money from the borough school for fire to open up put an addition on there. Now it's been remodeled again. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a question I had too, is like, obviously West Vine, Dean's Mill, they butt heads every now and then.
Sure.
But like, I've always wondered like which one came first
They were opened at the same time.
at the same time.
And
Yeah,
they were.
opened them up, they called them, everybody uses a different
Sure.
sister schools or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
They had the exact same layout. So if you walked into either school, it was set up exactly
Yeah.
the
And
same.
I mean, they still do.
Yeah,
so.
it's very similar now still.
Yeah.
So it was a little freaky for me because I went to Dean's Mill the first time I walked into West Vine once I was teaching here. We had a meeting over there or something, and I walked in and I had to do a double take, and it was exactly the same, and it's still very similar. Although I haven't been in the new West Vine yet.
Yeah.
You know, you got to figure, when I was youth officer, when I first started, it was 9 schools.
Yeah.
Now there's only 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, to go off of that, we just want to know some stories about when you were a police chief.
When I was the police chief.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Give us some of the great.
Well, it was an interesting job. I'll start and give you a little history on it. When I first started, the police station was next to the Pawcatuck Fire Department. And then they connected those 2 buildings together. So part of that building on the left side, if you look from the road, that was the police station. Then in '68, they moved over here to Human Services, and they built that building, and we were in that building. Then they put an addition on it. And then in 1988, 89, we went across to the new building. That's when I was chief. I was fortunate that people voted for the new building, and that's a beautiful building. We had building committees from all over the state of Connecticut and Rhode Island coming looking at it to get ideas for their buildings that they wanted. And it really upgraded everything too, because before that, Jennifer worked for us part-time for a while, but when she was going to college, and, you had an interview.
It was a very
and-
small building,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there was an interesting article in the paper, I don't know if you read it on Sunday, in regards to a cold case we had in the Stonington Police Department 20 years ago. There was a Mr. Jeffrey that lived up on Route 2 on Jeffrey Road. He was beat up by a person, and 2 weeks later he died in the hospital. Well, the main source that we had, and the Northern Day did a nice job writing it up. The main person we had broke into the Dairy Queen in Groton and got shot and killed. So that was but everybody was happy that was the person, and everybody really figured his handprints were found on the window in the house, And Mr. Jeffrey ran a Christmas tree farm up there, and apparently had some money in there, and he had some people taking care of him, and that's where this person got. But the article is a great, good, very good case. And then we had another case right around that time was a Charles Buck case. If you remember, the teacher.
She was my teacher.
She's a nice lady. She was a teacher in the school system. She was found dead on the bottom of her stairs from the second floor to the first floor.
Wow.
And everybody worked very, very hard on it. We had a couple of guys from the state attorney's office work with us, and did a lot of work on it. And they finally had the warrant for Mr. Buck, and he picked three judges to listen to the case, not a jury, 3 judges. And he had a big lawyer from up in Hartford that represented about everybody in the state that had money to pay for it. And he was found not guilty. And then later on, he fell off a roof and hurt himself.
I mean, everyone assumed he did it, but they just couldn't.
Right, he assumed he did it,
couldn't prove it, yeah. And
But
she was a
cases
beloved,
tie up, a lot of things
beloved
and
teacher.
so forth. And
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Oh yeah, I was watching the O.J. Simpson documentary on Netflix yesterday, and I was talking to my mom about not the same, but
Sure.
similar.
The fact that everyone was pretty sure,
Right.
but they couldn't quite connect the dots, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the toughest things I had a lot of times I got assigned was go and notifying a family of a death. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough, The worst one I ever had was we got a call from the Maine State Police that a gentleman who was in the Navy and he was up there in Maine, but he was living in Stonington. He had 4 children and his wife. They were living down by the town dock in the Madura house, rented. That he died in a motor vehicle accident. And would we go and notify us? So it was about 9 o'clock at night. Knocked at the door, and as soon as I come in, now I don't know her either. I remember looking at the plate in that driveway. Every time I walk by there, I often think of that case. It doesn't leave you.
Right.
And it was like from Missouri or somewhere like that. She was, Wisconsin, I think. And I, said, "Are you Mrs. So-and-so?" Yeah, and about the third question, she's, "What's up?" And I said, "Well, you had a husband." I said, he died, and it was tough. And then she started saying, "No, the chaplain for the Navy would have been here." It isn't true, We went through that, and I wouldn't leave the house. You never leave the house, You always make sure there's somebody with them, You never know what's going to happen. The stress. So the Navy chaplain came over and so forth, but that was a tough one.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Yeah.
And I had a classmate commit suicide, and the classmate he was married to was in my class. And I had to go and tell her, and it was. I went through a lot of them like that.
I can't even imagine that to me is like the hardest job in the world.
It's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
And I had to knock at a door that went down by the point where a guy and his brother-in-law blew up a fishing boat down there, and one of them died. And I had to go knock on his door and tell him, and so forth. And they were tough.
Yeah.
They were tough.
That is tough.
Yeah.
So going off the point, now the Starting to Point is the place where everybody goes and
Hangs out.
lights up.
Yep.
So, did the point ever have a purpose, or was it just kind of a tourist destination?
Well, I think it's just a geographic. It's always existed like that.
Right.
But the lighthouse was originally in a different spot.
Really, it was down by the flagpole.
Yes.
In the water.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that was So it was
Right.
Yes, that's
Okay. Right.
the main function of it. Let's put it that way.
Well, see, the point too, there was no, really, in the early 50s, now you gotta remember, there was no public sewage. Sewage didn't come in until about the early 70s. So when you went swimming over there, you had to be careful where you went because the restaurants dumped the water in the water. You know, you might see something floating by you. And so a lot of, when I did the history of the Stonington Community Center, we used to go swimming down to the place in Charleston, the pond down there.
Yes,
And
watch
swimming,
out.
but I took my swimming lessons down there. And then they finally, and the point was a lot more cleaner than other places. Like a lot of people went swimming off the town dock. You know, well, Binless's dock then, it was Longo's dock. And then the town bought it and it was Binless's dock. And so we went on, and Binless's dock was down, you know, where the restaurant is on the bridge there, right there. So those places there, you know, so the water wasn't clean.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and they went swimming off at Sandy Point, and then they finally put the beach in, and the Warden and Burgesses over there in the borough, and the community center and the town got together, and they kind of formed it, so they're all still a street part of that point.
Right.
And so there were some houses down there, the old pictures, you know, you can see some old houses down there. But then the community center took it over and managed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really, I had no idea about
I-
the lighthouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And actually, kind of going off like the tourists and everything, like what makes Mystic besides like the seaport, or if there's anything more, like what makes it such a big tourist destination? Because that traffic's horrible.
It is. So the Mystic Aquarium opened when I was in kindergarten, and that was a big deal. So that's the early 70s.
Well, because
I mean,
isn't it one of the biggest like aquariums in the country?
It's not on the scale of Boston or
Yeah.
Georgia, but it's a good one, and
Yeah.
it's a research-based aquarium.
Yeah.
So they've always drawn crowds there, but that whole area was farms.
Yeah, that was
Prior.
all farms. That was all farms. And
So-
it all started popping, you know, I can remember the first restaurant was coming off the, you know, they put the first hotel in over there about 66. Then it started.
Oh, yeah.
And it started. And you gotta figure that, see, they're on TV all the time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and the two biggest tourist attractions in Connecticut
Yeah.
is the aquarium and the seaport.
Yeah.
And 95 goes through, and it's halfway between Providence and New Haven, halfway between Boston and New York.
It's easy to
And
get
it's,
to.
you know, and there's a lot of other things that
Yeah.
connect to it too.
Yeah.
So they come over from the sub bases around there, and there's a lot of other places and other
Yeah.
towns. But Mystic is booming.
Yeah.
And I
Mystic
think,
is-
part of it too is I think just the natural beauty of the area. There's, and we're not far from the Rhode Island beaches. So I think if people come to this area, there's a lot of different things they can do, and there's things to do with their kids. So that brings in a lot of people. And I don't even go to Mystic in the summer, I'll be honest. I try to avoid it because it's too busy.
Oh.
I used to like to listen to the people when, a lot of times when we were on duty, we went by the flagpole. You know, there was a police post when I first came, there was a police post.
Down by the bridge.
Looked at the light to see if there was no, you
Right.
you gotta remember, there's no cell phones.
Yeah.
and no-
Right.
You know, none of that, walkie-talkies until the 70s. And people would come across, you gotta help me out. And I said, for what? He says, well, I went over there, I'm on the other side of the river, and it says Groton on the police car, you know? And then you come over here and it says Stonington. He said, where am I? You know, you're in Mystic. But you would have to explain to them, you know? And it's like, also you have to explain to people about the 6 fire departments in Stonington, where you got, you know, Walker-Duck, Wickety-Quack, Stonington, Quambog, Mystic, Old Mystic, the fire districts, you know? And then they go into Groton too, Mystic and Old Mystic go into Groton, you know? But it's
confusing if you're not from here.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and the ambulance corps, they got a lot of services, you know, and Stonington has changed a lot, you know, and I think about how, you know, like we're talking about 9 schools, now there's only 4, but it's a great community, You know, I always tell them you can't grow up in a better spot. You know that, and I
Very
know
lucky.
it.
Something we take for granted because
I
we're
think
here.
it's true.
Yeah.
I always told my guys when they were complaining when I was chief, they're working in the land of milk and honey. What are you complaining about, you know?
Oh yeah. Now downtown Mystic, because that's another big attraction.
Sure.
With all the shops and stuff. Was that always like stores, or was it?
It was always stores, but not of the type that we're going to bring outsiders in necessarily. So, like when I was young, Mystic Sporting Goods, Dick Neff's Sporting Goods was a big store, but that's not a tourist attraction. That's just where everyone went to get their sports stuff. But there were always restaurants down there.
More so now. Though.
Yeah, well, many more now, but I mean, there were restaurants, but there was BB Dairy, you know, like a diner type place, not a fancy, you know, award-winning restaurant. But there's always been shops down there, but it was more for the locals.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because now.
You know what? In downtown Mystic, they're on the side street there by the flagpole.
Yeah.
There was like 3 gas stations
Yeah.
that are around the corners.
And now it's all restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where the drugstore is, there used to be an Exxon station.
Yeah.
You know,
oh yeah, there's
gas
like,
station in there. I mean, then the whole building was torn down and put a new one in, and then going down the side street there, Santon's had a big Chevrolet, and then Valeni bought it, and then Valeni moved up to Old Mystic. At one time, Old Mystic was the smallest section in town. Now it's getting to be the biggest.
Yeah.
You see those big buildings, they're the biggest
Yeah.
buildings in the town of Stonington.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's you just follow Route 1 and it's restaurant. Once you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
But and then with the gas stations too, you got
Yeah.
what, three mobiles, 2 Shells, and then a couple others.
Yeah, and see, some of them moved too, like Brewster Lens was on Route 27 there, you know, by the traffic light there, like what, Broadway School. Then they went out, you know, to where they are now, they're on Route 1.
Yeah, it's crazy how stuff shifts around.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is an interesting one. Now the storm that broke Napattree and Sandy Point, which was
Hurricane of 38.
38.
now
The big one.
Yeah.
What?
Even as a mural enacted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
what other big damage was done in the town? Because I know there's a couple of buildings that got.
There was a big hurricane in the
Torn
50s.
The 54 hurricane, Hurricane Carol, was a big one. Because a lot of people, you know, I just recently had a meeting with the new director, about a year ago. I had a meeting with the community center director. And I told him, the old Como is where the bottom tennis courts are. And both times, the 38 and the 54 hurricane ruined the bowling alleys there. Because that water comes right up in, and I had pictures of it right where the thrift shop is. The water was 4 or 5 feet up on that window.
Wow.
You know, and all those they were garages over there too. They used to take them and go up and park them in a hayfield up and off of North Main Street. I remember, you know, because I lived down by the ball field there,
Right.
Owens Field. But that one there was a big one. That one was a big one. And I often thought, you know, in the borough, the water was right up on Water Street
Yeah.
there, right, you know, and they did a lot of damage with water and so forth.
A lot of flooding
you know,
damage.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know. In the 38 hurricane, there's a lot of stories, a lot of people go over and look at the old school reports where that hurricane came in there and they had some of them, they stayed all night in the borough school. They went in the hallways because they had those big windows, you know, and they kind of blew in, but they stayed there, and Mrs. Garrity played the piano for them.
The kids
You know, and
and the
later
teachers
on,
spent the night there
yeah.
because they couldn't get out.
They couldn't get out,
Yeah,
wouldn't let them
yeah,
out, you know.
yeah.
And then listening to some of the old timers where people came in to get them.
Yeah.
And they
Luckily,
had,
everyone
you
got
know,
out okay in the end. But
because the high school was there at the borough school,
Yeah.
then, you know, on the 3rd floor.
Yeah.
Up until 39.
Wow. Yeah, that's something I always thought about. Like if you're in school and then say you got like a massive snowstorm or something.
Yeah.
You know, like they keep you there, having to spend the night at school.
For your
I've always
your
thought about.
safety, but
Right.
it'd be quite an experience.
Yeah.
Do something.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on, sharing all the history. I love I love history. It's my favorite subject. So this was an awesome experience to get to know more.
Yeah.
So thank you both.
You're
Well,
very
I wish you
welcome.
both luck. You're a senior this year?
No, he's the senior. I'm the sophomore.
Oh, okay. He's got a couple more years.
Yep. All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.